Good day, everybody, and welcome to this Engage Employee webinar together with our partners at Questback. And today we're going to be looking on at why extraordinary organisations need extraordinary leadership and what we need to do to empower our teams, ourselves, and our organisations. My name is Steve Hurst. I'm the Editorial Director at Engage Employee, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Maurice L. Milton, who's President North America for Questback. I believe you're in Texas today, Maurice. Is that correct?
Yeah, I am in Texas. I am in Houston, Texas, where it is about 90 degrees with 95% humidity.
Sounds a bit uncomfortable, but anyway, we've got 65 degrees and very low humidity, I think, in London. And I'm also joined today, welcome, Maurice. I'm also joined today by Luke Talbot. Luke is VP Product Marketing for Questback, and I think you're in Winchester today, Luke. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I'm at Winchester. I'd like to say it's sunny here, but no, it's overcast and it's not tropical at all, not like in Houston.
Well, welcome to you both to today's webinar. Really looking forward to the session. This is actually the second in our series with Questback on leadership. I know that Luke is going to refer to the first one we did during the presentation, but second in the series, and we'll be discussing today how Questback's helping to develop modern leaders and how you can apply those learnings to your own organisation. Now, one thing I do encourage our delegates to do today is to ask questions. There's an Ask a Question button on your screen, and we can guarantee that any questions asked during the course of the webinar that aren't answered during the 45 minutes will be answered afterwards. So please do keep those questions coming in. I'm not going to take up any more of you guys' time because Luke and Maurice have got lots to get through. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to hand you over to Luke Talbot, VP Product Marketing at Questback. The floor is yours, Luke.
Thanks very much, Steve, and a great introduction. So today we've got quite a packed agenda, so we're going to try and keep it all fairly tight between Maurice and me. We're going to talk about what is leadership. As Steve said, we'll do a quick recap from webinar 1. And in this section, we'll look at what leadership really means and how that's developed and evolved over a number of years, and also what leadership development looks like in 2019 and why it's important. We'll then go through our Leadership 360 platform, which is currently deployed to quite a number of organizations, very large organizations globally, and how that's helping to create extraordinary leaders. And we'll finish on the importance of extraordinary leadership with a number of stories of how great leaders can deliver extraordinary results to organizations. And then finishing off with a Q&A from Steve, picking up any questions that you've posted as you're listening to the webinar. So let's start off. What is leadership? Luckily, I don't need to fully answer that question myself, but in the first webinar on the 25th of July, you can actually get this now on demand on engageemployee.com. You can also get it on YouTube on Questback's channel, the link is on the screen at the moment. Andrew Cox, who's an occupational psychologist with Questback, and Joseph Sherline, who's a pre-sales consultant at Questback, actually covered this in great detail. Joseph has actually got a doctorate in this, PhD focused almost entirely on transformational leadership and also on 360 leadership development. And Andrew Cox has a great amount of experience and in this area too. And what they covered was actually where leadership development and leadership assessment has come from, going right back to the beginning of the last century, and how that's evolved over time to become what we know today is mostly transformational leadership, and how a 360 leadership development or assessment tool works. Andrew also went through some very interesting research and numbers from some of our customers in terms of the gender gap and gender parity, and how we see the amazing importance that great leadership has to play in that area too, which is a really hot topic and very close to my heart, and I know many of you listening will feel the same way. So very much recommend that you go and listen to that, because we're going to be piggybacking off that, standing on the shoulders of those two giants very much in this webinar. And I guess where I want us to go now is just to, okay, so that's great, but we understand that leadership is where it is, but what's the big deal? Why is it so important to actually start measuring this? Well, the reality is that there's a massive manager gap. The gap between basically, where we think leaders are and them performing and being great, and actually the reality. This research from CEB, now part of Gartner, shows that actually employee satisfaction with manager quality is pretty much stagnant since, pretty much this entire decade. And that this is the bit that surprised me when I read this research, is that 5% of the workforce leaves their organization every year because of bad managers, which is obviously terrible. Maurice?
Yeah, I think that number's a little low, to be honest with you. I mean, most people that I know when they leave, typically it's related to their manager. So I think that number's a little low, but that is stunning because there's an enormous cost to the organization, an enormous hit on productivity. And to be honest with you, from my experience, I haven't seen a lot of organizations really managing that aspect of the business in terms of, churn per employee by manager. I think that's something that needs to be sort of looked into. And then when you also look at, in addition to that, you look at when you talk about leadership and you talk about development, when you're in a big organization and you got big numbers that you have to hit, you have to really wonder. I mean, here in this particular case, at L&D, the view here is 36% of their time. This is percent of the time L&D thinks managers should spend developing direct reports, and the actuality is 9%. When you look at the complexities around that, that's a big gap right there. And so, what do you do? How do you change that? What things can you do as a company to make sure that you're able to foster the right development with those employees? And because it's a big it's a big hit on your bottom line. You agree?
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, I was muted there. Not only do I agree, but I mean those stats. I mean they sound, the 36% versus 9%. If I'm supposed to be spending 36% of my time developing my direct reports, then I'm woefully inadequate as a leader. And if I think about it, I mean oh goodness, that's what is it? 1.5, maybe 2 hours a day that I'm supposed to be spent developing people, and I definitely don't do that. So I'm definitely closer to the 9%. These stats are probably, probably on the nose here. And I think the thing it really highlights in my case when I'm thinking about my leadership skills and my managerial skills is that I don't have the time to do 36%. So I must be able to prioritize that better. I need to know what do I need to prioritize? What are the gaps? What are the things I need to be working on with my team to try to improve that and make sure that they don't become, one of these people who unfortunately leave every year because of terrible leaders. I was going to add like me, but I don't think that's correct.
Well, I think once you get into the tool, the people will see. Sometimes you just don't know what you don't know, and I think that's one of the things the tool will help you identify in terms of, hey, where are your gaps in managing your managers and providing that leadership. I think that's what's highly critical in the value of the tool.
Yeah, exactly. And I wonder how many people are watching this thinking, well, 3 people left last year, but there's no way they left because of bad leadership, but so sometimes when you see the results and the data and the feedback from people, that paints a slightly different picture to what you think. So we'll get to that in a moment. Okay, so in that entire landscape, we've also got these 2 sort of tectonic shifts. That's not my phrase, that's actually from the CEB analysis. That shows that there are these 2 tectonic shifts in how we work, and I've certainly seen these. I've seen these in our customer base at the moment and how they use our software and how they're using feedback. But the first one is this organizational structure shift, with people moving towards from hierarchical, this strict command and control, lots of different layers of leadership and managers, to this kind of matrix-style organization. And I've heard this called a number of different things, and there's lots of research and studies on this. I've heard people talk about flatter keys, and about team of teams and all these sorts of things. But essentially what that means is as you start to move away from a strictly hierarchical organization, you actually need to, your employees and the people you work with need to work with them, with more people in different functions, different business units, different geographies. And there's also this idea that it's not about, there is a difference in leaders and managers. You know, managers are the ones that do the day-to-day, okay, you know, your holidays, your pay rise, all this sort of stuff. But actually the people who lead, that can be pretty much anyone inside your organization now. And alongside this, we've got this career expectations shift, where in the past, people would have joined a company, gone through several stages right up to retirement, but you know, it's kind of job for life. And now that's just gone. I mean, in most areas now, almost everybody will certainly work for many different companies throughout their career. And many people will probably have very different functions and activities across their careers too, sometimes that don't relate to each other at all. So now that we've got these, yeah, go ahead, Maurice.
Yeah, so yeah, you're right. I mean, especially when you're working in big organizations, I've seen people go from working in the business development team and then go from there, you know, where they're working with sales organizations, they're working with professional service team, and then I've seen those same people will roll into a sales manager role and then roll into a partner role. So all across the organization, you know, they're providing, you know, guidance and leadership as it relates to activities in the organization. So yeah, I 100% agree with you that the complexities of the organizations are changing. People are in, you know, different roles, but yet they can still have influence across the organization, like you said.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, just one personal anecdote on this organizational shift and career expectations shift. There's a guy who works in my team who theoretically is one of my direct reports. He won't mind me mentioning him. He's a bit of a rock star. It's Martin, and he has no direct reports himself, but he very, very frequently works as a leader of very large teams. I mean, just today I found out that Martin will be helping to work and lead a cross-functional team of, you know, maybe a dozen people, and so the, you know, what used to be a leader / manager in an old structure has now completely shifted. And what you need when you start looking at that is you need a different way of managing that. What we have on the screen here is a representation.
Just to sort of add on that last part, that was really important, that you really were identifying, and this is why I think, you know, everybody should, you know, be exposed to leadership, because in that role, Martin's going to be influencing and leading, even though he doesn't have any direct reports. He's going to be leading and influencing other teams, which impacts their productivity. And to me, that's crucial. You know, most people see a leader as someone who's managing a direct reported team, and I'm opposed to that thinking. I think that everybody has leaders within their team, and it can influence others within your team. And so it's important to make sure that leadership opportunity is exposed to everyone in the organization, not just, you know, managers who are trying to develop people.
Yeah, exactly. And so as we start to look at that whole, so now we've got the landscape that we operate in, the challenges of people leaving because of poor leadership, and now you start looking at the kind of tools that we give people to help to develop and improve leadership. On the right-hand side of this slide here, we've got you know, a typical 360 type you know, assessment of an individual. You've got that self at the center. The manager will provide a self-assessment, say, you know, okay, how am I based on all of these different criteria of leadership? You know, maybe learning and development is one of them, and then your direct superior or other managers would then be providing feedback based on those same criteria. So what do I think of Luke's ability to X, Y, Z? And then there's going to be a number of other rater groups. So maybe my peers, my direct reports, certainly if I have any, but also people who, you know, don't necessarily report to me hierarchically, but are working in a team that I'm running. And also, if I'm customer facing, maybe I'm a salesperson, then my customers should be part of that. So you have all these different rater groups who are rating, basically, in this case, Luke. And in the old world of hierarchies, that's very, very simple to manage. I know basically who reports to who. It's all in my organizational structure. But then there are two problems. One, the size of the organization. As it gets more and more complicated, it gets more and more difficult to maintain that. And so you tend to see these initiatives calendar driven. There's lots of process and planning involved. Then they will sort of restrict it to top level management or just certain tiers of management because it's easier to do that. And what we're seeing now is this self-driven shift. So if the organization is now much more fluid, if people are moving from place to place and working with different people across borders, there's simply no way that HR can keep track of that. In my example of Martin, I found out today that he's working with a group of people and I didn't actually know he's working with them. And that's fantastic because we're getting stuff done and he's just working really efficiently. But if I was HR, I wouldn't have a chance of being able to manage that. So you need something that's self-driven, that's easy, on demand for any employee. And you need it to support those non-hierarchical teams also.
Yeah. I think one of the things that to me is extraordinary about this is the self-driven piece, as you outlined here. Typically, what I've seen is an organization will identify certain individuals, and those individuals will go up through a leadership track. Well, here you got to remember with the results being exposed, you can find that diamond in the rough, that person that you didn't know had the skill sets and the abilities and the leadership skills that exist within them. You can find that diamond in the rough for those individuals who want to participate and leverage the tool. And you can see who really cares about their career. It gives them the opportunity to look and see, how they're developing, at what pace they're developing. So I'm all for a self-driven tool that's going to help optimize your team.
Yeah, exactly. And let's also think about, and this might be an uncomfortable conversation for some, but if we go back to the beginning when we talked a little bit about gender equality, about parity in the workplace, all these sorts of things. If and I hear this again and again and again, I've heard it like twice in the last month, that basically the leadership, we deliver our 360 tool to like people we identify as high potentials, people we've identified as great leaders already, or people we've identified as like the future executives of this organization. And so we're delivering this high value tool to the people that we've identified as being high value for the reasons of cost or whatever. And I think if you're looking to really democratize your organization as well, then you need to totally democratize those tools, because you will find that there are exceptional managers there who are overlooked by that, hey, you're going to join the executive team now. So I think this is a crucial part of companies joining the 21st century.
Yeah, I love the fact on the self-driven piece. And I always, and the fact that you're leveraging a tool, I always, tease my wife and say, hey, look, if it comes down to the tool or you, I'm going to believe the tool just because I'm a technology guy. And here's the same thing, if it comes down to what I believe about a person and then what the tools give me, the data that the tools giving back to me that's, sort of outlining this person's, structure as a leader, you've got to believe in that information.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, we're in this new world now where we need a tool that's self-driven, made for modern organizations. What I'm going to show you now at this stage is just a very quick demo. So let's have a quick look at what the tool looks like, right? Okay, so hopefully you can now see my screen. Is that right? Maurice?
Yeah, I can see it.
Yes, we can see it. Yeah.
I thought I was on my own there for a second.
No,
Brilliant.
you weren't, Luke, no.
Good. Okay, so you can all see my screen. I'm going to show you, this is a Questback Leadership 360 tool. It's what we're launching right now. And it's based on actually years of us working with very large and also not so large organizations. So a great breadth actually from small to medium right up to the largest enterprises that there are on their leadership development and on their feedback management systems. And so we developed something that is incredibly simple, that basically has 3 steps. You get feedback from your network, you check your strengths and gaps, and then you collaborate with your team to improve. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to log on as a test user. This is just me. It's not going to show any real results. Actually, a quick story. I said earlier that people don't like to see their results sometimes, or maybe they think they're great leaders. I did this with my team. I sent it to a huge number of people, and I spent a whole evening, and not literally crying, but worrying about the results, because it's amazing. It's amazing the things that you don't see as your blind spots, and so I think this sort of thing is hugely valuable to anyone who's in a leadership position, and in a modern organization, I would argue that's everybody, because it allows you to see quite clearly what you are, what people think you are good at, and what you're bad at. The Leadership 360 tool is pretty straightforward. I have some demo results and on the left-hand side here, but there are effectively 2 parts. There's a get feedback component and an action component. And inside the get feedback component here, we have a guide for leadership, and we also have other guides that we can plug in here, but I've got one for the purpose of this demo. So I'm going to start the guide. This is going to show me some information about this whole process. So it will tell you a little bit about why you're doing this. It will give you a link to the model if you want to learn more about the model and how to use it. So when we say model, in this case, we're talking about the questionnaire itself, the thing that's used to measure your leadership effectiveness. And then it will go through the process. So you get people to rate you, you see where to improve, take action, and do your follow-ups. So once you're happy with that, you click next. If you want to see the questions, you can see the questions, and you'll see here these are the dimensions and categories that are available out of the box. And the customers that we have doing this do a mixture of, some of them just use the model out of the box. That's very easy. It's very straightforward. It's an academically validated model that people are very happy with. But much larger organizations tend to already have some quite established leadership dimensions and categories that they want to measure. And so then there's a blend of people adding their own or just using their own model entirely. And that's also very straightforward for us. So in this case, I've got communicating vision, fostering innovative thinking, inspirational leadership, leading by example, support and development, fostering collaboration, and reward and recognition. And then when I hit next, so I'm quite happy with the questionnaire, I just get to invite people. Now, this is the complete self-service model, which means I just add people as I want. I can add people who aren't in the system just by putting their email address in, or I can add people who already exist. And when we deploy this to very large organizations, we also get this to automatically select people as well. So it can automatically select who my line manager is, for instance, or who my team is, and it gives me the option to override that if I want. In this case, I'm just going to put Nicola. She's my boss. So there you go, Nicola. She is actually in Germany today. So I'm going to hit next. And each of these groups, we could have more here. So at the moment, there are five rater groups that I can select from. And we could add more, or we can add more depending on, or fewer, depending on the organization. Right, team. Let's add a few people. So the aforementioned Martin, the rock star, let's add him. We're also going to add Buster. And these people will all appreciate the name check. Here's Paul. There we go. And we're going to add Paolo as well. There we go. And we can't forget Stel. Right. Okay. Well, that's a good, healthy chunk of people. You know, why not? Let's add Dennis as well. Okay. And Jennifer. No. Oh, maybe two N's. There we go. Right. Okay. There's my team. All of them rock stars, to be honest. But I could add more people. I could invite people who aren't even in the system yet. And just hit next, go to the peers. Here I can add some peers of mine inside the organization. Let's add Maurice. Oh, Maurice isn't there, so we're going to do maurice.milton@questback.com. And it's going to ask if I want to add him. So I'm just going to add him to the system, and he'll be invited as part of this. I'm going to add Radu, and also going to add our CEO. Right, now I can choose to add external people, or I could choose to ignore it. And again, the same with other. I'm going to ignore it for the sake of rapidity. Hit next, and I can add a personal message. They'll all get an email to invite them to this. So the email will say, in this case, your name. So Luke Talbot has personally selected you to answer a few simple questions. And here I just get to add a personal message. Hey, everyone. This is just a test. Okay, the number of these people get is crazy. So I'm going to now confirm and send. And it's going to send that out to everybody. And now I'll see this is completely self-managed. So at no point will anyone else have to get involved here. All these emails have gone out. I've invited 13 people. I can see my self-assessment is here. I can assess myself, which I'll do in a moment. My manager, my team, and my peers are there too. What I can also do is I can look at the email delivery status here quickly. There we go. And I can actually go into my team and say, actually, let's go into my peers. And say, oh dear, I've actually forgotten somebody. Who have I forgotten? Let's say I've forgotten Niels. Do you really want to add Niels to this guide wave? Yes. And boom, we've added Niels. So it's very likely that you'll forget somebody when you're doing this because you're adding everybody one by one, and you can just go in and add them. I can remind people whenever I want. I can actually move on to the next stage of the process if I've got enough responses and I know that I'm not going to get 100%, or I can just let it run its course and it'll just go for 7 days and the reminder will be sent in 5 days. So let's have a quick look at the self-assessment so you can see what that looks like. So my first name is Testing in this. So this will simply walk you through the survey. So this is my self-assessment, like I said. Now, one of the interesting things about this is we wanted this to be really good on mobile devices, and we wanted to get past that horrible where you have just matrices of questions, lots and lots of little radio buttons. So this is a very, very easy to use question on mobile devices. It focuses you on the question at hand, and it's sort of nice and modern looking. I'm not going to go through the whole thing because obviously we have more to talk about here. So that's simply how the survey would work, and then it would show that survey has actually been completed. And the same with everybody else. And there's full anonymity here, so I can't tell who said what. That's simply not possible. Okay. So that's it for actually initiating a leadership assessment. And you can see from this the difference between something centrally driven, where somebody in the organization would actually need to say, okay, now it's time for everyone, all these leaders that we've selected to do their leadership assessment, and inviting everybody and making sure everyone received the right emails and making sure everyone is assessing the right person, to what I've just done, which took moments and is done when the leader feels that it's the right time to do it. So when it's good for them to actually find out if they're a good leader or not. What you then get is immediate access to all of the results. So the leader will get an email when this is over. They get clean, simple results displaying everything on one page. They can quickly identify all of their gaps. And what we've done here is we've focused the results on action. So we want to make sure that people can actually see what the next step is, and we'll show that in a moment. I said right at the beginning that the point here is to try to identify gaps, things that you can improve and maintain. And so what the results mainly show are your strengths, your development areas, your hidden strengths, and your blind spots. And I think obviously the definition of all of these is fairly straightforward. A strength is something that you do well and your raters agree. So that's fairly straightforward. That's good. Everyone thinks that you're good at it, and so do you, and you know it. Whereas a development area is something that you don't think you do well, and your raters also agree. So you might be terrible at fostering innovation, for instance. But the two to really look for are your hidden strengths and your blind spots. So a hidden strength being something that I think I do brilliantly, but my raters disagree. And different rater groups might disagree about different things, which is why these tools are so important. So, for instance, I might think that I'm fantastic at fostering innovation. But my team might think I'm actually really bad at it, which means that's a really important blind spot to know about. Equally, it might be the other way around. I actually think I'm terrible at it, but my team think I'm pretty good. And I guess in terms of what you should focus on when you do your leadership assessment, there are different schools of thoughts, but one, Maurice, that we were talking about before is should you focus on improving your strengths or improving your weaknesses?
Yeah, I think in looking at all the data that I've seen from Gallup and other polling strength finder tools that I've used in the past, I subscribe to the notion of, I try to improve on my strengths and manage my development areas, meaning that from all the data that I've seen, that you can improve on your strengths dramatically compared to your developmental areas. So I'm not saying that I ignore my developmental areas. I certainly, when I leverage, these programs, I typically have goals, that helps me improve in those areas. But the goals are much greater on the strength side of it. That's my philosophy. How about yourself?
And I think, well, I have to agree. I think it is so much easier to focus on maintaining something you're already good at than to try to prop up something that is definitely a blind spot. I have to say though that when I did my leadership assessment, it was really interesting for me to see my biggest blind spot, which there's a school of thought that you shouldn't call these things weaknesses, you should call them development areas. But I think it's really important to know when you're bad at something. Because some people go through life not really realizing that they're terrible at doing something that they think they're great at.
I agree.
But largely, I agree. I mean, focus on stuff you're good at already, and you're just going to keep it get better and better, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you take your Ironman, for example. I mean, I think that you're better off trying to improve your running time and your cycle time, at least for me, than my swimming. Okay, my swimming's not going to get much better, so I've just got to. I'm going to have to manage that, right? But I think improve significantly on the running and the cycling piece of it. So that's how I would manage that whole thing.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Okay, and basketball analogies we could go to as well. There's probably one coming up in a moment, but I'm a pretty good center, but I'm a terrible point guard. I'm not going to start trying to lay in all the 3-pointers. Because it's just not going to happen. So, anyway, for those who know me, I'm 6'6", so that's why the basketball analogies work. So the next step, obviously, is to have these shortcuts to actions directly from inside your results. And so many times I hear this, and I actually, this isn't something that you just nail and it's perfect, and it's something that takes time to get right. You have to actually get actions that are linked to your results, because people won't know what to do next. And this is, I guess, one of the arguments that people have for spending so much time doing leadership assessments and managing it centrally, which is right, is that you need to be able to give people next steps. It's like, okay, so I suck at this, but how do I actually improve that? Or, what is the framework that I can use to improve that? And so what we've done in Leadership 360 here is we've embedded recommended actions into every single result. So if you have a poor score, if it's a blind spot, or if it's a hidden strength, we'll tell you what you can do to maintain or improve that. And then you can collaborate and share that with your whole team. So you can actually add collaborators. They might be your peers, they might be your managers, etc., throughout the entire organization. And you can then manage that action and try to make a difference. So the next time you do this, the ultimate goal is to try to then, make it better next time. So that things are improving. And all of this goes into a global executive view of leadership, where your L&D managers and even your HR executives can go in, and when they're talking to the CEO, they can say, hey, yeah, you know what? The biggest gap we have in our leadership in this country or globally or wherever is fostering innovation or career path or all these sorts of things. So, okay, so we're getting down to the tail end now of the webinar, and I thought it would be really important. What we thought we'd do is just share a couple of stories of extraordinary experiences, extraordinary leadership. And here at Questback, we really believe that experiences drive extraordinary people, extraordinary innovations, and extraordinary companies. We've seen before how people leave a company without great leaders. And so it really is about delivering an extraordinary experience to every employee in the organization. And it's kind of a truism to say that EX equals CX. We all know it. If you have a great employee experience, it's going to lead to a great customer experience. And so that's starting with your employees is such a good thing to do. It's like a win-win. And so what we want to do now is just talk about a couple of good examples of companies that have really either turned things around or from the very beginning got it right by getting the leadership structure and leadership right inside that organization. And Maurice, I know that you're more of an American football guy, but there's a hockey one here for you.
Yeah, this is to me. I mean, I'm all about leadership. You know, I'm all about improving, and when you have, there's different types of leaderships out there, and I think in this particular case, Craig Burrow is the hockey coach for Stanley Cup for the St. Louis Blues. Now, here's when you talk about experience drives the extraordinary. Here's a guy with 17 years of experience in the National Hockey League. In 2018, he takes over a team that finishes last. And by leveraging his experience, the team ends up winning the Stanley Cup. And he lived on the principles of the team comes first. As a player, he did the same thing for anybody that knows him. Do your job to the best of your ability. Basically, he's saying, give me your best every single day. If you don't, I'm going to take you off the ice. And then hey, don't be afraid to make mistakes. So I want you to do the job the best you can. If you make mistakes along the way, don't be afraid. It's okay to make them. Just learn from them and then move on. Hey, we win it. We win, we lose. When we lose, we're just going to move on. We're not going to live in the past. And with that experience, these guys went from last to first and won the Stanley Cup. They won the championship. And so to me, that's something extraordinary.
Yeah, that is amazing. And sticking with the sporting analogies very briefly, but pivoting into basketball because I'm just like that. There's actually a documentary, a sort of fly-on-the-wall documentary on Netflix at the moment called Basketball or Nothing. Follows a high school team in the Navajo Nation in the U.S. Who were, again, like bottom. They've won maybe 3 games. I can't remember the exact stats in the previous season. They got a new coach in, and this guy, Coach Mendoza, basically got them to the state finals in one season, and that's through just exceptional leadership, getting people to follow him, and you do that by just getting the whole team to work together as well and believe in that leadership. And so it's amazing to see that shift from bottom to top. St. Louis Blues, obviously, right at the very top of the profession, and this high school team, right at the very bottom of the profession. Leadership is the key.
Well, I think other leadership. I think we have to at least try to mention one business aspect here in the leadership of a company, and that's just leadership through innovation. And that's you look at Bezos over at Amazon. 20 years ago, 1997, his wife was working so he can have health insurance. And today, they're one of the most innovative companies in the world when it comes to delivering packages. To me, that's just phenomenal leadership. It's leveraging the technology. It's continuing to create and innovate on a broad scale where they have global impact. So I think there's definitely leadership written all over that organization.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm a massive user of Amazon, so I should have bought shares in that one. So the other one, and this is my favorite example of corporate leadership done differently, and this is a Finnish company. If anyone knows the story of Supercell, there's a lot being written about them, but they many case studies. But Supercell basically make video games or mobile app games, things like Clash of Clans, etc. And they have a completely different organizational structure. In fact, the CEO, I think they only started towards the middle of this decade, and then within a couple of years, they were probably worth something like $10 billion. So this, they'd only released like 4 or 5 games, and each one of them had topped the charts. And the way that they did that, actually, Supercell, Cell refers to like a small group of people or team working within the organization, and obviously Supercell being the organization as a whole, is there is no leadership. There's no sort of team managers or anything like that. There's no hierarchy at all. There's the CEO, and then there's loads of cells. And at one point, there's a couple of hundred employees. They chose what they wanted to work on. There was total transparency. Every single morning, everyone sees the business results, so no one is left wondering what to say, what's going on in the company. But also, it's just this complete trust in those cells to operate, and the cells are kind of self-forming. People get together and work on something. So in that context, your awareness of your leadership competencies is so important. And just a quick note on how powerful each cell is within that. At one point, I think this is one of their first games that they were going to release, a game called, I think it's Bomb Beach. The entire company thought this game should be canned, even the CEO. They were like, this is pointless. And the only people who believed that they should be developing this is the one cell. I think it was 5 to 10 people per cell who was working on it. And everyone's like, we're going to can this. But they were like, no, you know what? The way we work, that cell believes in it. They're working on it. Let's release it. And it actually became one of their most popular games. So it's a great story of just leadership done very differently, but where it's really important to measure the effectiveness of that leadership as you evolve into that structure.
Great story.
Yeah, really good one. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so that's pretty much it from us. I mean, we've shown you a little bit about why leadership is so important, and how it can be done, and also how Questback is developing tools that can help you to deliver extraordinary leadership. So, Steve, do we have any questions?
We do indeed, Luke, and thanks to you, Luke, and also Maurice for a really insightful presentation. I think it builds very, very nicely on the first webinar we did back in July as well. So, really, really good to have that information from you guys. Yeah, a question here. What is the timeline for onboarding this solution?
Okay, yeah, good question. Yeah, so if you wanted to get this up and running just for yourself as a kind of a self-improvement thing, then you could get this up and running in minutes. You simply just go onto the website, leadership360.questback.com, and you're up and running in a few clicks. So that's fairly straightforward. If you want to get this up and running for large teams, then I would say probably, so we have organizations running this, a couple of 100,000 employees, for instance, tens of thousands of leaders using the tool, then you're looking at obviously a longer deployment. So I would say anywhere between, a week and a few weeks of deployment to that size, and you'd probably do it in a phased approach, choose a subset of the organization to roll out first.
So fairly rapid deployment then, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, okay. Yeah.
Thanks for that. Yeah, and does the solution work for performance management as well as development? It seems that from what you said that it does.
Well, it can certainly, so it's been designed for leadership development.
Yeah.
But we have had quite a lot of interest from companies who are moving towards continuous performance management. And I think what they like is the idea that you can sort of have a more continuous approach to leadership performance. So it can certainly work within that framework. But what you saw on the screen is mostly geared towards leadership development, but could be applied to that too.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, thank you. Will solutions like Leadership 360 help to better address gender pay gap, diversity, and inclusion of the workforce? That's something that was touched on in the last webinar as well. Will it help that?
Yeah, Maurice, I'll hand this one over to you.
Yeah, it will. I think what you'll see, when you go through the program, it gives you data, and that data, provides you with certain information where you can, have the ability to, analyze and see what's going on in the workplace as it relates to that.
Okay, thanks for that, Maurice. Got time for a couple more questions before we close. Can any size organisation use the tool? Is it flexible around scaling?
Yeah, that's actually. Yeah. Go ahead, Maurice. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think any size of organization could use it. It really doesn't matter the size of the organization, small, big, small, medium, or large. We're a commercial business. We have commercial software, and it's available to everyone.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's one of the strengths of it. So as an anecdote, if there are people listening who are from very large organizations, one of the concerns is always how do you deploy it to so many potential leaders, especially if we're talking about everyone potentially being a leader. And so one organization that we work with rolled this out to a couple of hundred people to sort of test it in one area, and have since started rolling it out. I think it's something 90,000 leaders is the number of people who are actually getting this. And then ultimately everyone in the organization, which is a couple of 100,000.
So it really is at scale then, yeah, that's interesting.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for that. And time for one final question before we close the show today. What kind of ROI does this solution and the leadership development deliver? Have you got? It'd be good to get both of your views on that actually before we close. Yeah.
Well, from my perspective, I think it boils down to looking at the data within your organization. I think it boils down to looking at what are you doing in this area today. Looking at your current churn in the organization, and also looking at your current employee engagement model. So I think this alone, isn't this alone could help, but I think there's a package. A whole package that must be delivered around to be successful and get a good return on investment.
Absolutely, Maurice. Final word with you, Luke, for today.
Yes, yeah. So exactly. So on the ROI question. It's people often look for an ROI for a tool, and I think with this one, if you're replacing an existing process with this, then you're going to be very pleasantly surprised in terms of the cost. If you're, I think this sort of leadership evaluation, like Maurice said, works with an overall package as well of how we're doing our continuous listening and engagement, and there you're talking about things like increasing productivity, reducing churn. The numbers are going to be different from company to company, so. But companies with high levels of churn, I think will see a very large return on investment generally from focusing on improving leadership.
Fascinating stuff. And thanks once again to you both. Thanks, Maurice and Luke, for a really interesting presentation, and some great questions coming in. And we have got some more questions coming through. And as I said before, any questions we didn't get the chance to answer during the 45 minutes of the webinar will be answered afterwards. And more good news is that, as with the last webinar, this one will be available on demand for 6 months, and I'm sure it will end up on the YouTube channel as well. So lots of information was imparted there, and there will be lots of opportunities to go back over the presentations from Luke and Maurice. So just really now to thank you guys, thank Questback for making the webinar possible today, and thanks to everyone for attending today. And you'll notice on that final slide, we've actually got the internal comms conference coming up in a couple of weeks' time. I'm sure some of the issues that were being talked about today will be touched on at our internal comms conference on September the 17th. Have you both enjoyed today, Maurice and Luke?
That's been brilliant.
I really, really appreciate it today. I think it's very, every time I have the opportunity to speak on this product, see how I see the fit where it has in the enterprise. So yeah,
absolutely. Wonderful. Okay, well, thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone. And I'm sure in the next in this series will not be that far off. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.